Thomas Mitchell had finally found what he was looking for after 6 months of searching. The 200-acre ranch in Montana was perfect for his needs, isolated enough to provide the peace he desperately craved, yet close enough to town for basic supplies. The realtor had mentioned that the previous owner had left suddenly, selling far below market value, but Thomas did not care about the reasons. He needed this escape from his old life more than he needed explanations. At 45, Thomas was exhausted from 20 years of running his successful construction company in Chicago. The endless phone calls, demanding clients, and constant stress had taken their toll. His divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, and his 2 adult children were busy with their own lives. The heart attack he had suffered on a busy job site had been his wake-up call. His doctor had recommended reducing stress, and Thomas had decided the only way to do that was to change everything. The ranch house was modest but well-built, with 3 bedrooms and a large kitchen that overlooked rolling pastures. The red barn stood about 100 yards from the house, weathered but sturdy. There was a smaller outbuilding that could serve as a workshop, and miles of fencing that would need repair. Thomas saw it all as exactly what he needed: honest work, with his hands instead of managing other people's problems. Moving day was simple, since Thomas had sold most of his furniture and belongings before leaving Chicago. He packed his truck with tools, basic household items, and a few boxes of personal items. The freedom of owning so little felt liberating after years of accumulating possessions he had not really wanted or needed. The first week at the ranch was exactly what Thomas had hoped for. He woke with the sunrise, made coffee on the old stove, and spent his days exploring the property and making lists of repairs that needed attention. The silence was profound after years of city noise, broken only by wind through the grass and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Thomas started with the house, fixing leaky faucets and replacing worn floorboards. The work felt good after months of sitting in offices and conference rooms. His hands, soft from office work, quickly developed calluses again. His back ached in the evenings, but it was the satisfying ache of physical labor rather than the tension of constant stress. By his second week, Thomas had established a routine. He rose at dawn, worked on repairs until lunch, then spent afternoons exploring the vast property on foot. The land was beautiful, with rolling hills covered in native grass and a creek that ran through the eastern section. He had seen deer, rabbits, and even a few elk in the distance. The barn had been his biggest concern when he first toured the property. It was old but appeared structurally sound, though it would need a new roof before winter. Thomas planned to tackle that project once he finished the more urgent repairs on the house. For now, the barn served as storage for tools and equipment left by the previous owner. One evening, as Thomas sat on his front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, he reflected on how much his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been Thomas Mitchell, successful businessman and workaholic. Now he was just Tom, a man with dirty hands and a peaceful heart. Living simply on his own land, the nearest neighbors were 5 miles away, and Thomas had only met them briefly when they stopped by to introduce themselves. The Hendersons were a retired couple who had lived in the area for 30 years. They seemed friendly, but respected his obvious desire for privacy. "Let us know if you need anything," Mrs. Henderson had said. "Country folks look out for each other." Thomas appreciated the gesture, but was grateful they did not seem inclined to drop by unannounced. He was still adjusting to the profound quiet of rural life and was not ready for social obligations. The solitude was healing in ways he had not expected. For the first time in years, his mind felt clear and calm. On his 3rd Thursday at the ranch, Thomas decided it was time to begin working on the barn. He needed to assess the roof damage before ordering materials. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect for outdoor work. He gathered his tools and walked across the pasture, enjoying the feel of dew-soaked grass beneath his boots. The barn's main doors were heavy and creaked loudly when Thomas pulled them open. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, illuminating, dust motes dancing in the air. The space was larger than he had remembered, with several stalls along one side and a loft overhead. Farm equipment and hay bales left by the previous owner filled much of the floor space. Thomas climbed the ladder to inspect the loft and get a better look at the roof damage. The wooden rungs were solid despite their age, and he made it to the top easily. The loft was spacious and filled with old hay. Light filtered through several holes in the roof, and Thomas could see that some of the support beams would need attention, as well as the roofing itself. As he moved carefully across the loft floor, examining the beam structure, Thomas heard what sounded like a whisper. He stopped moving and listened carefully, wondering if wind through the roof holes was creating strange sounds. The whisper came again, definitely human, and seemed to be coming from the far corner of the loft. Thomas approached the sound carefully. Concerned that someone might be injured and hiding in his barn, as his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light in the corner, he saw them. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, was crouched behind several hay bales with a small child pressed against her side. Both were dirty and thin, their clothes torn and worn. The woman looked up at Thomas with eyes full of terror and desperation. She clutched the child tighter, a little girl who appeared to be about 4 years old, with tangled blonde hair and enormous frightened eyes. Neither of them spoke, but Thomas could see they were both shaking. Whether from cold or fear, he could not tell. "Hey there," Thomas said softly, keeping his distance so as not to frighten them further. "It's okay. This is my place, but you're not in trouble. Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The woman's eyes darted toward the ladder, clearly calculating whether she could escape with the child. Thomas raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you or call anyone, but you both look like you need food and maybe a doctor. When was the last time you ate?" At the mention of food, the little girl stirred and looked up at her mother with hope in her eyes. The woman's resolve seemed to crumble slightly, and Thomas saw tears begin to roll down her dirty cheeks. Thomas remained perfectly still at the top of the ladder, giving the frightened woman and child time to process his words. He could see the internal battle playing out on the young mother's face, the desire to run warring with obvious desperation and exhaustion. The little girl continued to stare at him with wide, curious eyes that seemed too old for her small face. "My name is Thomas," he said gently, settling back on his heels to appear less threatening. "I bought this ranch a few weeks ago. I live in the house over there." He gestured toward the main building, visible through the barn's open doors. "I'm not going to call the police or anyone else. I just want to help if you need it." "Ah!" The woman finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're not thieves. We haven't taken anything. We just needed somewhere safe to sleep." "I didn't think you were thieves," Thomas replied calmly. "How long have you been staying here?" The woman glanced down at the child, then back at Thomas. 3 days, maybe 4. I lose track sometimes." Thomas's heart clenched at the exhaustion in her voice. Both mother and child were clearly malnourished, their clothes dirty and inadequate for the cool Montana nights. The little girl was wearing what appeared to be a summer dress, despite the autumn weather. Her mother's jacket was thin and torn. "What's your name?" Thomas asked the woman. She hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Rebecca, this is Lily." She stroked her daughter's tangled hair protectively. "Hello, Rebecca." "Hello, Lily." Thomas kept his voice soft and steady. "I was about to go back to the house and make some breakfast. There's plenty of food, and it gets pretty lonely eating by myself. Would you like to join me?" Lily perked up at the mention of breakfast, tugging on her mother's sleeve and whispering something Thomas could not hear. Rebecca shook her head quickly, pulling the child closer. "We can't," Rebecca said. "We need to keep moving." Thomas studied the pair carefully. Rebecca looked like she had not slept properly in weeks, and there was a bruise on her left cheek that was fading to yellow. Lily appeared to be a healthy child despite her obvious hunger, but she stayed pressed against her mother's side with the instinctive caution of a child who had learned to be afraid. "Are you running from someone?" Thomas asked quietly. "Rebecca's?" Eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slightly. "My ex-husband. He's not a good man. He found us at the last place we stayed, and we had to leave in the middle of the night." Thomas felt a familiar surge of protective anger, remembering his own daughter at that age and imagining anyone hurting her. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain calm and reassuring. This ranch is pretty isolated, Thomas said. No one would think to look here, and I don't get visitors. If you wanted to rest for a day or two, get some food and clean clothes, it would be completely safe. Rebecca was clearly torn between hope and fear. Thomas could see the exhaustion winning out over caution as she struggled to make a decision. Lily had curled up against her mother's side and appeared to be falling asleep despite the uncomfortable position. I have a guest bedroom, Thomas continued. Clean sheets, a warm bed, and a bathroom with hot water. When was the last time you had a proper bath? He asked Lily directly. The little girl looked up at him shyly. I don't remember, she whispered. That seemed to break something in Rebecca's resolve. She closed her eyes for a moment, then looked directly at Thomas. If we came to the house, just for a little while, you wouldn't tell anyone we were here? I wouldn't tell anyone, Thomas promised. As far as the world knows, I live here alone. Rebecca nodded slowly, then began helping Lily to her feet. Thomas climbed down from the loft first, giving them space to descend at their own pace. When they reached the ground level of the barn, he could see how unsteady Rebecca was on her feet. She had clearly been running on adrenaline, determination for far too long. The walk from the barn to the house seemed to take forever. Rebecca kept looking around nervously, scanning the horizon for threats that might be approaching. Lily held tightly to her mother's hand but kept stealing glances at Thomas, her natural childhood curiosity beginning to overcome her learned wariness. Inside the house, Thomas gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit down and rest while I make some breakfast. Do you like pancakes, Lily? The little girl nodded enthusiastically, the first real smile Thomas had seen from her. Rebecca sank into one of the kitchen chairs as if her legs could no longer support her weight. Thomas moved slowly and deliberately, keeping his movements predictable so as not to startle his nervous guests, as he mixed pancake batter and heated the griddle. Thomas found himself studying Rebecca when she thought he was not looking. She was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 22 or 23. Despite her exhaustion and fear, he could see she had been pretty before whatever circumstances had driven her to hide in his barn. How old are you, Lily? Thomas asked, as he flipped the first batch of pancakes. I'm 4, Lily announced proudly, holding up 4 fingers. Mama says I'm very smart for 4. I bet you are, Thomas agreed, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of her. Your mama is right. Rebecca watched nervously as Lily began eating, as if she expected Thomas to snatch the food away at any moment. Thomas placed a second plate in front of her, along with butter, syrup, and a glass of orange juice. Eat, he said gently. Both of you need to get some strength back. Rebecca took a tentative bite, then began eating more quickly as her hunger overcame her caution. Thomas made several more batches of pancakes, pleased to see both his guests eating with genuine appetite for the first time in what was probably days. These are the best pancakes ever, Lily declared, syrup covering her chin. Thomas chuckled, handing her a napkin. My daughter used to say the same thing when she was your age. You have a daughter? Rebecca asked, speaking directly to him for the first time since they had come inside. 2 children, actually. They're grown up now, living their own lives. Thomas poured himself coffee and sat down at the table. They don't visit much anymore. Something in his tone must have conveyed that this was a source of sadness for him, because Rebecca's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Life happens, Thomas replied with a shrug. Sometimes families drift apart. After breakfast, Thomas showed them to the guest bedroom and bathroom. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears again at the sight of the clean bed with fresh sheets, and Lily immediately climbed onto the mattress and bounced experimentally. The bathroom is right through there, Thomas said. There are towels in the closet and soap in the shower. Just take as long as you need. I'll be working outside if you need anything. As Thomas closed the bedroom door behind him, he heard the sound of running water and Rebecca's quiet sobs of relief. He stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to process how completely his peaceful solitude had just been disrupted by 2 strangers, who clearly needed his help more than he needed his privacy. Thomas spent the afternoon working on fence repairs, giving Rebecca and Lily privacy while staying close enough to the house in case they needed anything. The sound of running water continued for over an hour, and he could not help but smile, imagining how good that first hot shower must have felt after sleeping rough for days around 3 in the afternoon. He saw Lily appear at the kitchen window, her face clean and her hair still damp from washing. She waved at him shyly when she caught his eye, and Thomas waved back before returning to his work on the fence posts. The simple interaction felt surprisingly pleasant after weeks of complete solitude. When Thomas came inside for dinner, he found Rebecca and Lily sitting at the kitchen table. Rebecca looked transformed after her shower, younger and less frightened, though the wariness remained in her eyes. Lily was wearing one of Thomas's old t-shirts that hung like a dress on her small frame, and Rebecca had found a clean flannel shirt that fit her reasonably well. "I hope you don't mind," Rebecca said apologetically. "Our clothes were pretty dirty, and I found these in the closet." "Of course I don't mind," Thomas assured her. "Those clothes were just sitting there unused. They look better on you than they ever did hanging in the closet." Thomas prepared a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, foods he thought Lily would enjoy. As they ate together, he learned more about his unexpected guests. Rebecca had grown up in foster. Karen married her ex-husband when she was 18, believing she had finally found the family she had always wanted. "He seemed so nice at first," Rebecca explained while Lily colored on paper Thomas had found for her. "He had a good job, a nice apartment. He said he wanted to take care of us." Thomas nodded, understanding the unspoken parts of her story. Had seen enough domestic violence cases through his work with various charities to recognize the signs. Rebecca's flinching when he moved too quickly, her constant scanning for exits. Lily's unusual quietness for a 4-year-old. "When did things change?" Thomas asked gently. Rebecca glanced at Lily, who was absorbed in her coloring. "When I got pregnant, I started getting jealous of the attention I was paying to the baby, even before she was born. Then, after Lily came, he said I loved her more than I loved him. That must have been frightening." Rebecca nodded, her hands unconsciously moving to cover the faded bruise on her cheek. "It got worse after I tried to leave the first time. He found us at my friend's house and convinced everyone that I was unstable, that I was keeping his daughter. From him, even the police believed him." Thomas felt his jaw clench but kept his expression neutral. "Is that why you've been staying in hiding instead of going to shelters or family? He knows all the places I might go, his friends who help him look for us. The only way to stay safe is to keep moving and stay out of sight." After dinner, Thomas suggested they watch a movie together. He found a children's film that Lily might enjoy, and they settled in the living room with bowls of popcorn. Thomas sat in his recliner while Rebecca and Lily curled up together on the couch, sharing a blanket Thomas had provided. Watching Lily laugh at the movie's silly characters, Thomas felt something shift in his chest. The child's delight was infectious, and he realized how much he had missed having young voices in his house. His own children had been this age so long ago, and those memories felt precious and distant now. When the movie ended, Lily had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder. Thomas carried the little girl to the guest bedroom, marveling at how light she felt in his arms. Rebecca followed, tucking the covers around her daughter with practiced tenderness.
"Ass.
She hasn't slept this peacefully in weeks," Rebecca whispered, as they watched Lily settle into the comfortable bed. "Thank you for giving us this night." "You don't need to thank me," Thomas replied quietly. "Every child deserves to feel safe." They returned to the living room, where Rebecca sat nervously on the edge of the couch. Thomas could see she was struggling with something, and he waited patiently for her to find the words. "We can't stay here long," she finally said. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door. If he finds us here, if he hurts you because you helped us. ... Double quotes. Thomas leaned forward in his chair. "Rebecca, look at me." When she met his eyes, he continued, "I'm a grown man who chose to help you. Whatever consequences come from that choice are mine to handle. You don't need to protect me." "You don't understand what he's capable of," Rebecca said, her voice shaking slightly. "He's charming when he wants to be. He convinces people that I'm the problem, that I'm mentally unstable. He made my life hell for 3 years, and when I finally left, he made sure everyone believed it was my fault." Thomas studied her face, seeing the intelligence and strength that her ex-husband had tried to destroy. "What's his name?" Rebecca hesitated, then whispered, "Marcus Webb. He's a car salesman in Billings. Everyone thinks he's this great guy who's been wronged by his crazy ex-wife." Thomas nodded, filing the information away. "How long has it been?" "Since you left, 2 months? We made it as far as Wyoming before he found us at a truck stop. We've been moving constantly since then, never staying anywhere more than a few days. That's no life for Lily, Thomas observed. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I know. She should be in preschool, playing with other children, sleeping in her own bed. Instead, she's living like a fugitive because I couldn't make my marriage work. Hey, Thomas's voice was firm but gentle. This isn't your fault. You didn't make him violent. You didn't make him controlling. You made the brave choice to protect your daughter even when it meant giving up everything else. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Sometimes, I wonder if she'd be better off with him. At least she'd have stability, her own room, proper food. And she'd learn that it's normal for men to hurt women, Thomas said quietly. She'd grow up thinking that's what love looks like. Is that what you want for her? Rebecca shook her head immediately. Oh, never. I'd rather live in my car forever than let her think that's acceptable. Then you made the right choice, Thomas said firmly. And now you have some time to figure out your next steps without looking over your shoulder constantly. Over the next hour, they talked about practical matters. Rebecca had a small amount of money saved, but not enough for first. And last month's rent on an apartment? She had been a waitress before Lily was born, but had no recent work experience or references. Her identification documents were in her ex-husband's possession, making it difficult to get legitimate employment. What about changing your names? Thomas suggested. Starting completely over somewhere he'd never think to look, Rebecca had clearly considered this option before. It takes money to disappear properly. Fake documents, transportation to somewhere far away, deposits on apartments. I have maybe $300 total. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, an idea forming. In his mind, it was impulsive and probably foolish. But something about Rebecca's courage and Lily's innocent trust had touched something in him that had been dormant for years. What if you didn't have to disappear? He asked slowly. What if you could stay? Somewhere safe, while you figured out a permanent solution? Rebecca looked at him with confusion. What do you mean? Thomas took a deep breath, knowing he was about to change his carefully planned, solitary life completely. I mean, this ranch is big enough for all of us, and I could use help with the work. You could stay here, help me fix the place up, and Lily could have stability while you plan your next move. The offer hung in the air between them, surprising them both with its implications. Rebecca stared at Thomas in complete silence for nearly a full minute, her mind clearly racing to process his unexpected offer. Thomas waited patiently, understanding that his suggestion had probably caught her completely off guard. The idea had surprised him too, but once spoken, it felt right in a way he had not anticipated. You would let us stay here? Rebecca finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You barely know us. We could be anyone. Thomas considered her words carefully before responding. You're a mother protecting her child from an abusive man? You've been living rough for weeks, but the first thing you did when I offered help was worry about bringing trouble to me. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. But what would people think? A single man living with a woman and child who aren't related to him?
Oh.
Thomas shrugged. The nearest neighbors are miles away, and I don't socialize in town much. Besides, I'm old enough to stop caring what people think about my personal choices. Rebecca stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark expanse of the ranch. Thomas could see her shoulders shaking slightly, and he realized she was crying. He stayed in his chair, giving her the space to process this unexpected opportunity. I haven't felt safe in over 2 years, Rebecca said without turning around. Even when we were hiding, I was always listening for his voice, always ready to run. The thought of staying in one place, of Lily having a real bed and regular meals, ... You don't have to decide tonight, Thomas said gently. Sleep on it. See how you feel in the morning. Rebecca turned back to face him, wiping her eyes. What would you expect from us? You mean, if we stayed, what would our arrangement be? Thomas had been thinking about this since the words left his mouth. I could use help with the ranch work. Do cooking, cleaning, basic maintenance. Nothing you couldn't learn easily. And Lily needs to be in school. There's a small elementary school in town that would be perfect for her school. Rebecca's face lit up with hope. She could go to real school, of course. Every child deserves an education and the chance to be around other kids her age. Rebecca sat back down on the couch, her mind clearly working through the possibilities and potential problems. What about Marcus? What if he somehow finds us here? Thomas's expression hardened slightly. Then we'll deal with that situation when and if it happens. This ranch is legally mine, and I have every right to have guests. If he shows up here making threats, I'll call the sheriff. You don't understand, Rebecca said urgently. It's very convincing. He'll tell them I kidnapped Lily, that I'm unstable. He's done it before. Do you have custody papers? Thomas asked. Rebecca shook her head. We never went to court. When I left, I just took her. Legally, he probably has as much right to her as I do. Thomas made a mental note to look into legal options for Rebecca. There had to be ways to protect her and Lily through proper legal channels, especially if there was documentation of abuse. The next morning, Thomas woke early as usual, but lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people in his house. He could hear quiet voices from the kitchen and the sound of someone making coffee. After weeks of complete solitude, the presence of his guests felt both strange and oddly comforting. When he emerged from his bedroom, he found Rebecca at the stove making pancakes while Lily sat at the kitchen table, coloring in a book Thomas did not remember owning. I hope you don't mind, Rebecca said, glancing at him nervously. I found pancake mix in your pantry and Lily was hungry. I don't mind at all, Thomas assured her, pouring himself coffee from the pot she had already prepared. It smells wonderful. Lily looked up from her coloring book, which Thomas now realized she must have had in her small backpack. Look, Mr. Thomas, I drew you a picture of your house. The drawing was typical 4-year-old art, with a square house, triangle roof, and stick figures standing in front. But Thomas felt unexpectedly moved by the gesture. That's beautiful, Lily. Can I hang it on the refrigerator? Lily's face lit up with delight as Thomas carefully taped her artwork to the front of his refrigerator. Rebecca watched this interaction with a soft expression, and Thomas realized she was probably not used to seeing adults treat her daughter with genuine kindness. Over breakfast, they discussed the practical aspects of the arrangement Thomas had proposed. Rebecca would help with housework and ranch maintenance in exchange for room and board. They would enroll Lily in the local elementary school and establish a routine that would give the little girl stability and normalcy. What about identification? Thomas asked. Lily will need birth certificates and vaccination records for school. Rebecca's face fell. Marcus has all our documents. Birth certificates, social security cards, everything. He took them when I tried to leave the first time, said it was to keep me from running away with his daughter. Thomas added this to his growing mental list of legal issues they would need to address. We'll figure it out. There are ways to get replacement documents, especially for a child. I don't want to cause you trouble, Rebecca said, for what felt like the 100th time since he had offered them sanctuary. Rebecca, Thomas said firmly. I'm a grown man making a conscious choice to help you and Lily. Stop worrying about causing me trouble and start thinking about what's best for your daughter. That afternoon, Thomas drove into town alone to run errands and gather information. His first stop was the elementary school, where he spoke with the principal about enrollment requirements for new students. The conversation was encouraging. The school was small and welcoming, and they had experience working with families in difficult situations. His second stop was the sheriff's office, where he introduced himself to Sheriff Martinez and casually mentioned that he was considering having some friends stay at his ranch for an extended period. He wanted to establish his presence in the community and get a feel for how local law enforcement might handle any future complications. Sheriff Martinez was friendly and professional, welcoming Thomas to the community and assuring him that if he ever had any problems at his ranch, the department would respond quickly despite the remote location at the general store. Thomas picked up supplies for his expanded household, including clothes for Lily and Rebecca. He had guessed at sizes, but the store owner, Mrs. Peterson, was helpful and knowledgeable about what would work for a 4-year-old girl. When Thomas returned to the ranch, he found Rebecca and Lily in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds while Lily collected interesting rocks in a small bucket. The domestic scene struck Thomas as incredibly peaceful, stark contrast to the fear and exhaustion he had seen in both of them just 24 hours earlier. "How was town?" Rebecca asked as he unloaded shopping bags from his truck. "Good. I spoke with the principal at the elementary school. She seems very nice, and she said they could accommodate Lily as soon as we get her paperwork sorted out."
Rebecca's
Hands stilled in the dirt. "Really? She could start school that soon?" "If that's what you want," Thomas confirmed. "I also picked up some clothes for both of you. Just basics, until we can figure out a more permanent solution." That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Thomas felt a contentment he had not experienced in years. Lily was playing with a toy horse Thomas had found in town, making up elaborate stories about the horse's adventures. Rebecca sat quietly beside him, more relaxed than he had yet seen her. "Thomas," Rebecca said softly, "I've made my decision. If the offer is still open, Lily and I would like to stay, at least for a while, until we can figure out something permanent." Nodded, feeling oddly emotional about her decision. "The offer is still open? And Rebecca? There's no timeline on this. Stay as long as you need to feel safe and get back on your feet." As if sensing the importance of the moment, Lily abandoned her toy and climbed into Rebecca's lap. "Are we going? To live here now, Mama? Can I go to school with other kids?" "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca said, stroking her daughter's hair. "We're going to stay here with Thomas for a while, and you're going to start school soon." Lily grinned and launched herself from her mother's lap into Thomas's arms, surprising him with an enthusiastic hug. "Thank you for letting us live in your house, Mr. Thomas." As Thomas held the little girl and watched Rebecca's grateful tears, he realized that his quest for peaceful solitude had led him to something much more valuable than he had expected to find. 3 months into their new arrangement, Ranch had transformed from Thomas's quiet retreat into something resembling a real family home. Lily had started school and was thriving, making friends and bringing home artwork that now covered most of the refrigerator and several kitchen cabinets. Rebecca had proven invaluable in helping with ranch work, showing an unexpected talent for fixing equipment and organizing systems that made everything run more smoothly. The morning routine had become comfortable and efficient. Thomas would start coffee while Rebecca made breakfast, and they would take turns helping Lily get ready for school. The drive to town was 15 minutes each way, and Thomas found himself looking forward to these daily trips that broke up his formerly isolated existence. "Mrs. Henderson wants to meet you," Thomas told Rebecca one morning as they drove back from dropping Lily at school. "She keeps asking when she can come over and welcome you properly to the neighborhood." Rebecca tensed slightly, the old wariness creeping into her expression. "What did you tell her about us? That you're helping me with the ranch work and Lily is your daughter, which is the truth." Thomas glanced at her reassuringly. "She's harmless, Rebecca. Just a lonely older woman who likes to mother everyone in a 20-mile radius." Over the past months, Thomas had watched Rebecca slowly begin to relax and trust their safety. She no longer startled when he entered a room unexpectedly, and she had stopped constantly scanning the horizon for threats. But the suggestion of meeting neighbors still triggered her protective instincts. What if she asks too many questions? What if she mentions us to someone in town who knows Marcus? Thomas had considered this possibility. "Rebecca, you can't live in fear forever. At some point, you have to trust that you've found somewhere safe." That afternoon, Rebecca was working in the garden when a familiar black truck turned into their driveway. Thomas was in the barn, but Rebecca could see him through the open doors. Her heart began racing as the truck approached, every instinct telling her to grab Lily and run. But Lily was at school, safe, and running was no longer their first option. The truck stopped near the house, and Rebecca watched in frozen terror as a man got out. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and an expensive jacket that seemed out of place on a Montana ranch. Even from a distance, Rebecca recognized the confident swagger that had once made her feel protected, but now filled her with dread. Marcus had found them. Thomas emerged from the barn, clearly having heard the truck. He approached the visitor with casual friendliness, but Rebecca could see the tension in his posture when he noticed her fear. She tried to signal him to be careful, but Marcus was already extending his hand in greeting, flashing the charming smile that had fooled so many people. "You must be the owner of this place," Marcus said with practiced friendliness. "Beautiful property you have here. I'm Marcus Webb, and I'm looking for my wife and daughter." I have reason to believe they might be in this area. Rebecca felt her knees go weak. She crouched lower behind the garden plants, hoping Marcus had not seen her yet. Through the leaves, she watched Thomas shake Marcus's hand with apparent politeness. Thomas Mitchell. Thomas replied calmly. What makes you think they'd be around here? This is pretty remote country. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Thomas photos that Rebecca knew were of her and Lily. Rebecca is mentally unstable, and she took my little girl without permission. I've been searching for months, and a truck stop attendant in Wyoming remembered seeing them head this direction. Thomas studied the phone screen with what appeared to be genuine interest. Pretty woman? Cute kid? But I haven't seen them around here. Like I said, it's pretty isolated. If they were in the area, they'd probably head to town for supplies. Mind. If I look around, Marcus asked, his tone still friendly, but with an underlying edge. Just to put my mind at ease. I'm worried sick about my daughter's safety. Rebecca held her breath, knowing that Thomas was making a split-second decision that would determine their future. She could see Marcus scanning the property, his practiced, taking in details that might indicate the presence of a woman and child. Of course, Thomas said easily. Though I should warn you, I've got equipment running in the back pasture. Might be safer to stick close to the buildings. As the two men walked toward the house, Rebecca crawled carefully through the garden, rose toward the small shed where Thomas stored tools. Her phone was in the house, but there was an old radio in the shed that Thomas used to communicate with. The Hendersons in emergencies. She managed to reach the shed without being seen and quietly turned on the radio. Mrs. Henderson answered immediately, recognizing Rebecca's voice with concern. Rebecca, dear, what's wrong? You sound frightened. Please. Rebecca whispered urgently. Call the school and tell them not to let Lily leave with anyone except Thomas or me. Tell them it's an emergency and her father is not authorized to pick her up. I'll call right now, Mrs. Henderson assured her. Are you in danger? Should I call the sheriff? Rebecca could hear voices approaching the shed. Not yet. Just protect. Lily, please. She clicked off the radio and pressed herself against the wall behind a stack of feed bags. Through a crack in the shed wall, she could see Thomas pointing out various ranch features to Marcus, keeping up a steady stream of casual conversation that was clearly designed to distract and delay. This is quite an operation for one man, Marcus commented, his tone suggesting skepticism. You must have help, I managed, Thomas replied. It's good honest work, keeps me busy. Marcus was clearly growing frustrated with the tour, and Rebecca could see him becoming more aggressive. In his questioning, look, I'm going to be straight with you. My wife is sick, and she's convinced herself that I'm dangerous. She's filled my daughter's head with lies about me. If you're hiding them here, you're putting that little girl at risk. Thomas stopped, walking and faced Marcus directly. It's a serious accusation. Are you saying I'm harboring fugitives? I'm saying that if Rebecca is here, she's probably told you I'm some kind of monster. But I've never laid a hand on her or my daughter. I just want my family back. Rebecca felt sick listening to Marcus's lies delivered with such sincere conviction. She had heard this performance before, had watched him convince police officers, social workers, and family friends that she was the unstable one, the problem that needed to be managed. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Well, like I said, I haven't seen them, but if I do, I'll be sure to call the authorities and let them sort out who has the right to that little girl. Marcus's expression hardened slightly at the mention of authorities, and Rebecca realized that Thomas had just issued a subtle warning. Marcus was clearly debating whether to push harder or retreat and try a different approach. I'd appreciate that, Marcus said finally. Here's my card with my number. You see anything suspicious? Any sign that they might be in the area? Please call me immediately. Thomas accepted the business card with apparent cooperation. I'll keep an eye out. Must be hard, not knowing where your family is. You have no idea, Marcus replied. And for a moment his mask slipped enough to show the cold anger underneath. After Marcus left, Thomas waited until the truck disappeared down the road before calling out to Rebecca. She emerged from the shed on shaking legs, her face pale with terror. He's going to come back, she said immediately. He'll wait and watch. He'll figure out we're here. Thomas put his hands on her shoulders, his touch gentle but grounding. Rebecca, look at me. He's fishing. Doesn't know for sure that you're here, or he would have brought the police. "You don't understand," Rebecca said, her voice rising with panic. "He's patient. He'll watch this place. He'll talk to people in town. He'll find out that you've been bringing Lily to school." Thomas realized she was right. Marcus Webb was clearly intelligent and determined, and their little family had been living openly in the community for months. It would not take much investigation for him to confirm their presence. "Then we need to be smarter than he is," Thomas said calmly. "And we need to make sure that when he does figure it out, the law is on our side." That evening, after they had retrieved Lily safely from school and explained the situation in terms a 4-year-old could understand, Thomas made several phone calls. The first was to a lawyer in Billings, who specialized in family law and domestic violence cases. The second was to Sheriff Martinez, reporting that a suspicious man had been on his property asking intrusive questions. "We're not running anymore," Thomas told Rebecca as they sat on the front porch after Lily had gone to bed. "We're going to fight this legally and properly. You and Lily deserve to feel safe without constantly looking over your shoulders." Rebecca leaned against Thomas's shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. After months of peace, the terror was back, but this time she was not facing it alone. The legal battle that followed Marcus's visit was intense, but ultimately successful. Thomas's lawyer, Jennifer Martinez, was experienced in domestic violence cases and immediately recognized the pattern of abuse and control that Marcus had used. She helped Rebecca document everything, from the intimidation tactics to the financial control that had made escape so difficult. The turning point came when Jennifer discovered that Marcus had a previous domestic violence conviction from before he met Rebecca, something he had successfully hidden during their relationship. Combined with Rebecca's testimony and evidence of his stalking behavior, they were able to obtain a comprehensive restraining order and establish Rebecca's legal right to custody of Lily. "He won't give up easily," Jennifer warned them during their final meeting. "Men like Marcus Webb don't accept losing control. But legally, you're protected now. Can't take Lily, and if he violates the restraining order, he'll face serious jail time." The process took 4 months, during which Marcus made 2 more attempts to approach the ranch. Each time, Thomas called the sheriff immediately, and each incident strengthened their legal case. Sheriff Martinez had quickly sized up the situation and made it clear that Marcus was not welcome in his county. By spring, Rebecca had begun to truly believe they were safe. The legal protections were in place. Marcus had been quiet for several weeks, and their life on the ranch had settled into a peaceful routine that felt permanent rather than temporary. Lily was flourishing in school, bringing home stories about friends and teachers every day. She had started calling Thomas Papa Tom without being asked, and he had begun including her in more of the ranch work, teaching her to feed the chickens and care for the horses he had recently acquired. "She's never had a stable father figure," Rebecca told Thomas one evening as they watched Lily practice riding her new pony in the small corral he had built. "You've given her something I could never provide on my own." Thomas felt a warmth in his chest, watching Lily's determined concentration as she learned to control the gentle mare he had chosen specifically for a beginner. 2. I forgot what it felt like to be needed, to have someone depend on me for more than just a paycheck. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the months. What had started as a protective arrangement had grown into something deeper and more complex. They worked together seamlessly, shared parenting responsibilities naturally, and had developed the comfortable intimacy of 2 people who had learned to trust each other completely. One evening in May, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Rebecca finally broached the subject that had been on both their minds for weeks. "Thomas," she said quietly, "what are we doing here? I mean, what is this relationship between us?" Thomas considered his words carefully. Over the past months, he had grown to love Rebecca and Lily in ways he had not expected when he first offered them sanctuary. But he was also aware that Rebecca's gratitude might be confused with romantic feelings, and he did not want to take advantage of their situation. "What do you want it to be?" he asked gently. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. "When I married Marcus, I thought I knew what love was supposed to feel like. But being here with you, I've learned that love isn't supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to make you afraid or small. Thomas reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. You're not the same scared woman I found in my barn 9 months ago. No, Rebecca agreed. That woman was running from something. I'm not running anymore. She turned to face him fully, her eyes clear and determined. I love you, Thomas.
Not
because you saved us, not because I'm grateful, but because you're kind and patient, and you make me feel like the person I was always meant to be. Thomas felt his heart swell with an emotion he had thought he was too old to experience again. I love you too, Rebecca, you and Lily both. You've made this house feel like a home instead of just a place to hide from the world. Their wedding was small and simple, held in the meadow behind the house where Lily played every day. The Hendersons served as witnesses, and Sheriff Martinez walked Rebecca down the short aisle, having become something of a protective father figure during their legal battles. Lily served as flower girl, scattering wildflower petals with serious concentration before announcing loudly that she was excited to have a real daddy now. The ceremony was interrupted several times by her enthusiastic commentary, but no one minded her 4-year-old's perspective on the proceedings. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister said with a smile. You may kiss the bride. As Thomas kissed his new wife, Lily cheered and clapped, and even the usually reserved Hendersons were wiping away tears. The little family that had been formed by chance and necessity had chosen to become something permanent and official. 2 years later, Thomas and Rebecca welcomed a son, James, who became the center of Lily's world and completed their family in ways none of them had anticipated. Lily was an enthusiastic big sister, insisting on helping with every aspect of baby care and announcing to anyone who would listen that her little brother was the best baby in the whole world. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint management. Rebecca had discovered a talent for breeding horses, and their small herd had grown into a profitable business. Thomas had built a larger barn and expanded the pasture land, but the heart of the operation remained the family that worked it together. Marcus had eventually moved to another state and remarried, apparently having found a new target for his controlling behavior. The restraining order remained in effect, but he seemed to have lost interest in pursuing his former family. Lily rarely asked about her biological father anymore, calling Thomas his dad without any qualifiers and seeming genuinely puzzled when people mentioned that he was not her real father. He is my real dad, she would insist with 6-year-old logic. He's the one who teaches me to ride horses and reads me stories and fixes my toys when they break. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the ranch work was done, Thomas and Rebecca would sit on their front porch and marvel at the unexpected turn their lives had taken. Thomas had bought the ranch seeking solitude and peace, never imagining that his greatest healing would come from opening his heart to a scared woman and child who needed sanctuary. Do you ever regret it? Rebecca asked one such evening, watching the stars appear in the vast Montana sky. Giving up your peaceful bachelor existence for all this chaos? Thomas looked around at their life, at the toys scattered in the yard, the laundry hanging on the line, the comfortable chaos of a house filled with family. Never, he said firmly. I thought I needed solitude to heal from my old life. Turns out what I really needed was purpose and a family to love. Rebecca curled up against his side, content in the knowledge that they had both found something better than what they had originally been seeking. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as disruptions. Sometimes home is not a place you build for yourself, but a place you create with people who need you as much as you need them. In the barn where he had first discovered them, Thomas had hung a small plaque that visitors often asked about. It simply read, "Not all who wander are lost, and not all who hide are running from something bad. Sometimes they're running toward something better." It served as a reminder that the scared mother and child who had taken shelter in his barn had not been trespassers or intruders, but the family he had been waiting his whole life to find.